Now, you could be forgiven for thinking that I'm going to be talking to you about the language, about driving standards, maybe even about the climate, but you're wrong. I actually think the biggest struggle when it comes to living in Italy is mindset. Now, I feel like this can be broken down into three key areas: everyday life, also family connections, and work. And I think it's really interesting because if we take the first concept, first of all, everyday life, this is when the mindset here in Italy, particularly here in the south of Italy, from my own experiences, can really test you. So I live in Sicily, and for those of you who aren't really aware, Sicily is pretty much synonymous with the word struggle. Speak to any Italian person and they will most likely tell you that yes, Sicily is renowned for its food, its beaches, beautiful water, the beautiful climate. But it's also equally notorious for the poverty, the lack of organisation, and for the fact that pretty much Sicily feels like it isn't even really a part of Italy. So it can be pretty complicated living here, and I've been living here for nearly 2 years this year. And so I really do understand this region a lot better than when I was just coming here a couple of times a year. So it's really interesting to understand how the mindset of people can really be impacted by everyday life. Take this news report, for example. This was published in Palermo today, this week, and it basically states that it has taken 10 years to excavate 1.5 kilometers of tunnel for a metro line here in the center of Palermo. 10 years for 1.5 kilometers. Just to give you some context, if you don't use kilometers to measure distance in your country, that is just under 1 mile, the equivalent of like a 15 to 20 minute walk. It's pretty incredible. Yet, when you talk to people here about this story, there's a mixture of laughter, kind of like pazienza, and just like an overall, well, you know, this is Sicily. And it's kind of interesting how people can actually normalize this kind of situation. Now, Italy is complicated because essentially when you start excavating underground, you're more than likely going to come across some kind of archaeological ruin or something of historical importance. That means that that particular project more than likely will either be significantly delayed or even abandoned. However, there's no such news about some archaeological discovery that has disrupted this project here in Palermo. So I really don't know what the problem is, but essentially it means that for the majority of people that live here in Palermo, they will probably never see this metro line come to fruition in their lifetime. And that's a really sad thing, especially because there is almost this mindset here that when a hole starts to be dug here in Sicily, it's going to be years and years in the making. And I don't really understand how people can be okay with that. And I find it very difficult here sometimes because I come from the UK, London to be precise, and it is not a perfect city. You only have to look at the news in recent days to see how we are struggling with immigration, with political problems, with, you know, money even. Like, you know, our economy is not great at the moment. And there are a lot of problems to do with traffic and to do with parking fines. It's a problematic city and a problematic country. However, something like this, I cannot ever imagine happening in the UK. Projects can take a long time for sure, but 1.5 kilometers in 10 years, it's pretty unbelievable. And we're not just talking about like big maintenance projects here, we're also talking about like bureaucracy. There is a mindset here in Italy that absolutely baffles me when it comes to bureaucracy. It's one of the most difficult things about living here is when you have to deal with any kind of government office or any kind of bureaucratic matter. And I remember watching a television show recently, and it showed the inside of like a regional office somewhere in Italy. And there were just shelves upon shelves full of binders packed full of documents. I felt like I'd gone back in time to maybe like the 1960s. Like that was when like all personal and important documents would be stored in paper files on shelves. But I kind of thought, like, what if there was a fire in that office and all of those documents were destroyed, how would you ever recover that information? Like, we are in 2024. Where is the use of technology that can actually save that in a more secure and efficient way? It's not to say that technology is foolproof, because it isn't. Like, you can have hackers and all sorts of things go wrong, but there is more chance of being able to salvage something online than there ever is if your paper copies are destroyed. It's really incredible sometimes. I feel like there's a very old-fashioned, old school way of thinking here sometimes, especially in the south of Italy. And I think as a mindset, this can be very, very difficult, particularly if you're very forward thinking. You have great ideas, grand visions, and yet the people around you are stuck 30 years in the past, the way things used to be done. Like, for example, if you want to start a business here in the south of Italy, once you've kind of navigated your way through the ridicule that you'll receive, because it's almost considered to be an unbelievable feat to begin a business here in the south of Italy because of all this bureaucracy and the incredible tax system that we have here. But once you've navigated that level of ridicule that you'll more than likely receive, you've then got to start navigating how to grow and build your business in a part of Italy where people believe that in-person connection is the be-all and end-all. Now, let me tell you, I do agree that in-person connections are important. And I really do agree that actually there is something very magical about the way that Italians have really kind of encapsulated this aspect of life into their everyday activities. Like, day-to-day in-person interactions, you cannot beat them. But when it comes to growing a business, it is not the only way to grow a business. Like, online connections, like social media, utilizing the ability of the internet now to grow a business is equally as important as meeting people face to face. Yet there is a mindset here in the south of Italy that you have to grow a business by individually meeting with people, and that's how you become successful. Sometimes it's very difficult to navigate that kind of mindset here in South Italy. Now, Sicily is one of the poorest regions in Italy, and you can feel it sometimes. Like, I will be walking around Palermo, I will see people rummaging through rubbish bins looking for clothes or looking for items that they need, and you do feel it. Like, you feel it inside of yourself when you're walking around in certain parts of Palermo that, you know, there is poverty that exists here. And so it can be very difficult sometimes to have a really good money mindset when you live in this kind of environment. Now, there is an amazing quote. I cannot think of who said it in this moment, but essentially, you are the best of the 5 people that you surround yourself with. And so if you are constantly surrounded by people who have a really, really negative mindset when it comes to money, at some point that's going to also rub off on you and impact the way that you view money. And it's interesting because I've had a situation like this happen to me recently, in the sense that I'm working on something which I hope to launch this week with this whole Miss Brutally concept, because I've had a lot of people asking me for this particular service. And although I cannot offer this service in the exact way that people would like, I can offer something that will be equally, if not better, than the original concept. Except I've been met with people's opinions that are like, well, nobody's going to pay for that. People don't want that kind of service. But that is the mindset of people who live here. Like, I know, coming from the UK, that this service is invaluable for people that don't have enough knowledge or information about life here in Italy and want to have an incredible experience here. And so I have, thankfully, an alternative perspective on the situation. But the mindset of people here is that, like, people don't want to pay for things that might be considered a bit expensive, or people don't want to pay for particular services. Somebody once told me that Italian people are considered to be the worst tourists because they don't like to pay for anything, and they can be pretty stingy when it comes to going on holiday. They are not the tourists that will flash the cash when it comes to buying things. And so I wonder if this plays a part in it. But there is no denying it. There is a real problem with poverty here, and not enough support from the government to kind of help those who really need it. And I think it can be very difficult to maintain a strong money mindset here when you are constantly faced with this in your everyday life. And you look around and you see parts of the city that are really neglected, and then other parts which are clearly for the tourists to see, that receive a lot of investment, love and attention. And so it can be really difficult sometimes to kind of keep your mindset strong if you are somebody who wants to create something better for your life and rise above the environment that you're currently in. And so everyday life here, especially here in Sicily, can be really, really challenging on your mindset based on all the factors that I've mentioned so far. So you really, really, really have to focus on keeping yourself in your own path and not allowing external factors to alter you in any way, because it can be really destructive if you do. The next aspect when it comes to mindset is family. Now, the way people here, especially in the South, view families can be very, very different compared to the country that you're from. The mindset here is that family is everything, and families tend to be very close. They tend to see each other often. Sometimes they even live in the same building, sometimes even in the same apartment or house. There's a really strong family connection and unit here. It's not the same for everyone though. This is very much a stereotypical perception of family life here in South Italy and in Italy in general, but there are family units here who are not as close and who can be considered to be like more broken, if you like, in the sense of the connections are not as strong. But predominantly, families are very, very close here. And within that, you have particular roles within the family. And there is a mindset, especially here in the South, about how women what they should do in the house, for example, in a family situation, like their roles, their responsibilities, namely the cooking, the cleaning, managing the house, as well as maybe raising a family or even having a job or whatever other things that they also have to juggle. And so it's interesting sometimes, because I do think there is a very old-fashioned view when it comes to family here in South Italy. I think it's very beautiful. I think there is a lot to be said for family units that are very close. But I think in terms of like the division of roles within a family, I think that can sometimes be very, very old-fashioned and limiting. And it can be difficult sometimes to adjust to that, particularly if you come from a country where there is more equality in terms of what people do in a family and in terms of how a house is managed and run, for example. And I think it can also be difficult if your own family unit isn't perfect and you move here to Italy and you are surrounded by what looks on the surface to be the idyllic, perfect family life. But something that I have learned over the 6 years that I've been living here is that it's not always the case. Just scratch a little bit beneath the surface, you'll find that there's actually a lot of problems, complications, toxicity in many families. And it took me a while to realize that, because I arrived here and I was like, goodness, you know, I'm really like strange. I don't have this kind of connection with my family in the same way. But actually, when you really spend enough time here, you realize that a lot of it is an illusion. A lot of it is a front that is placed to the world. But actually, when you spend enough time in family circles, you see these kind of negative aspects for yourself. So I think family can be a big thing that plays on your mindset, and also just the way that people view family here. It is an important aspect of life, but it's not all that it seems sometimes. So if you are moving to Italy and you are moving on your own, or you are moving from a difficult situation, don't let that kind of deceive you, because not every family here really is perfect. And then we move on to the mindset when it comes to work. This is a really big topic. In fact, I filmed a video about the ugly truth of working in Italy right up here if you fancy watching it next. But essentially, the working mindset here is very different. First of all, I'll talk about opportunities. Tied into what I was talking about in the first point with everyday life, if you want to start your own business, sometimes the mindset to look for opportunities is very different here. People are closed. People look at the struggles. People look at what's going on around them, and they kind of look at the complicated country that is Italy, and the bureaucratic system and the government, and you know, the fact that the pay hasn't increased for over a decade. And it's kind of like people get sucked up into this toxic circle, and it essentially means that people don't have the capability or capacity to look for opportunities outside of that. They get too stuck into this whole pacienza. There's nothing we can do about it. Let's continue our life in this way. This is just how it is here. I find it very difficult sometimes because I'm somebody who will always try and turn lemons into lemonade. I always try and find an opportunity in any given moment. It's not always possible. Sometimes it's very, very, very difficult to do it. But I do my best because I realise that you don't have to be a product of your circumstances. You do not have to be influenced or impacted just because you are living or growing up in an area which isn't necessarily supportive of your dreams. Like, you can still look for opportunities, but you have to have a strong mindset to be able to do that, because chances are the people that are surrounding you are going to have the lack, the problematic, the negative mindsets that are going to keep you small and are never going to give you the kind of motivation to look for something more in your life. And so I think, that's the first aspect I would say when it comes to work. This is the reason why a lot of people leave the south of Italy, for example, to go to the north of Italy, to even leave Italy entirely, because they cannot see any opportunity here. It is challenging here in the south of Italy. I do understand that certain sectors are not well represented, the pay is not the best. There are many factors here that make it more tempting to leave this part of Italy and go and work elsewhere. But I will say that if you want to make a success of something here, you can. It is mindset. And I've just started reading an incredible book called The Expectation Effect. And even just in the opening chapter, which is what I'm on at the moment, it basically says that your mind can turn heaven into hell and hell into heaven. Like, it's the power of our mind. If we want to make an opportunity here, you can. There are plenty of successful businesses here in Palermo and in the south of Italy. I mean, we have designer shops here. We have Prada. We have Yves Saint Laurent. There are plenty of designer shops here, plenty of businesses that are doing well here, but it's so easy to get sucked up into the majority mindset here, which is like, that's the exception, not the rule. But it doesn't have to be that way. And I think that's the first thing that I really want to say. And then you have the mindset of employers here. This is a tricky one because I do think that, generally speaking, you can have really shitty employers in any part of the world, like even in the UK, just because we live in a country where in the UK, you have your rights respected more. There are trade unions. There are people that will speak up more about your working conditions. It doesn't mean that you are immune from having like a really terrible boss. They exist everywhere. But I do think the mindset of the people is different. In the UK, for example, you will find that people will speak up more if there are injustices or there are problems, because they feel a bit more protected. There are different regulations, different laws, different trade unions that can support workers. And this is why we tend to strike a lot. And this is why, people will be more vocal about discrimination and things like this in the workplace. Here in Italy, here in South Italy especially, less so. Yes, sometimes there are protests. I've noticed some in recent months here in South Italy. But essentially there is just this feeling of like, just got to put up with it. It's just the way life is here. Just got to carry on with it. Put up and shut up, essentially. This is the mindset. And it's strange because I kind of feel that this mentality will keep people locked into this kind of vacuum for a very long period of time. Because if you're not willing to speak up and try to implement change, then nothing is ever going to change. And I think the working culture here has taught me some of the biggest lessons. The mindset of people here has taught me some of the biggest lessons, that you must have boundaries, that you must not be afraid of speaking up when things aren't right. And you have to teach people how to treat you. Like, essentially, if you put up and shut up and you never say anything, people do what they will with you. And I see this in my everyday life. I see people who are treated like rubbish bins because they don't speak up and they don't express how they really feel about something. They just tolerate it, they put up with it. But essentially you do have to speak up, and I think this is a mindset that can be difficult when people around you stay silent, when people around you say yes and you are that no person. It's very easy to become kind of vilified for this behavior. But essentially there is an unhealthy mindset, I think, here when it comes to working culture, very much so. I hear from people how they are discriminated in their workplace because they're a woman. Like, if you become pregnant, for example, there can be different discrimination aspects that occur on the back of that. And it's really like absurd for me to hear this, because it's just so different in the UK. It's not perfect by any means, but it is different. And like when you consider there isn't a minimum wage here in Italy, so people could work for like absolute pittance, and the employer can do that legally. There isn't a minimum wage, and kind of the average salary of an Italian citizen has stayed the same for like over 10 years, whereas the price of everything is like gradually increased. There are so many factors that really test your mindset here when it comes to work. And I think, you know, there is another thing as well that really blows my mind. This kind of highlights just how desperate in a way the situation is. There are what are called concorsos here in Italy, which are like public competitions, if you like, where for jobs like teachers in state schools and various other positions, including medical positions as well, you have to sit what is known as a concorso, or this public competition. And essentially, you have to study for it, you have to take this exam, but normally the number of available places is really, really small compared to the number of applicants. Like, I know people who have recently taken these so-called concursos, and there have been like 5 spaces, but there have been like over 5,000 people that have taken the exam. Like, it's insane. Like, the ratio alone tells you how impossible the situation is. It's difficult. I'm not going to say it's impossible though, because that kind of goes against the entire message behind this video, because I do think mindset is something that will test you the most when you live here, particularly if you've had different experiences in different countries as well. But the reason I'm not going to say it's impossible is because I'm one of those people that feel that, you know, what you think will become a self-fulfilling prophecy. What you believe will become a self-fulfilling prophecy. And I kind of feel that, you know, if you move here to Italy, you have to be prepared to maintain a strong mindset if you really want to navigate the complexities of life here. It's not a walk in the park. It's not the Dolce Vita. And, you know, I can be criticized on this channel sometimes because people think that I'm, I don't know, too real about Italy sometimes. I'm not just telling you the fairy tale stuff, but I feel like you deserve to know this. Because if you really want to make a success of your life here, these are the things that you have to get in order before you move here. You've got to start doing the work on your mindset. What are going to be your go-to tools and techniques when life starts to get tough here? Because I guarantee it will happen at some point. What are you going to do? Because you don't have your creature comforts around you. You're in a brand new country. What are you going to do to protect your mental health, to protect your mindset? These are some really serious questions that I feel that you need to ask yourself if you intend to live here in Italy. And I think there's also like another really, really important question you have to ask yourself always is why? Why am I doing this? And I talk about this a lot more in this video right here. So go watch that next, and I'll see you in the next video.